In this brutal post-mortem, we are going to expose why Zom 100, the zombie comedy about a salaryman who gets superpowers in a zombie apocalypse, went from being one of the most anticipated anime of the season to being a complete and utter disaster that crashed and burned before our very eyes. So, grab some popcorn, settle in, and get ready for the brutal truth, because I'm not holding back in the slightest today. As always, spoilers for the entirety of Zom 100 will be present throughout this video. So if you haven't seen it, then don't click this video until you do. Starting off with our first reason for why Zom 100 collapsed, we have episodes delayed for months. Now, depending on when you watch the anime, you may not even remember this issue at all. That's how big of an issue it was. But to start off this post-mortem, we need to go back to July of 2023, where the first 2 episodes of Zom 100 premiered. And then, nothing. For the next 3 months, fans waited and waited for the 3rd episode, only for it to premiere in October, nearly 3 full months after the last episode had premiered. This is easily the worst case of delayed episodes that I have ever seen in my entire life. Even shows with movie-length episodes don't take this long to release episodes. With 7 Deadly Sins being the only show that I can think of that has had worse scheduling than this. It's just absolutely mind-boggling that people thought that this show could succeed with this type of schedule. Moving on to our next reason, which is quality dropped to PS2 Cutscenes. Now, the animation for Zom 100 was handled by the studio Bug Films, who previously worked on shows such as Gamers and Yu Yu Shiki. And while those shows are not top tier in terms of animation quality, they were still enjoyable and had decent art styles. Unfortunately though, something happened between those 2 shows and Zom 100 where the art style for some reason became extremely muted, washed out, and lifeless. It went from being a vibrant anime to being a depressing slideshow. Every single environment felt lifeless, and the character designs were completely butchered. It was like a completely different studio animated the first 2 episodes compared to the rest of the season. And the biggest kicker is that there is no excuse for this whatsoever. There was no delay due to illness or death in the family. The studio simply vanished off the face of the earth for months at a time with no communication whatsoever. Now, it is worth noting that the manga did suffer from art quality issues as well. However, even with that in mind, the anime adaptation was much worse and should have been fixed during the adaptation process. The fact that they were unfixed and the art got even worse in the anime is what led us straight into our next problem. And speaking of problems, did the anime even have source material? The thing with adapting a manga is that you need to make sure that you stay within the source material as closely as possible unless you want your anime to go off the rails and become something completely unrecognizable. That's exactly what happened here. Because as I mentioned before, the manga art style is pretty bad. However, the story is solid. So to fix this issue, the studio decided to rush through the manga as quickly as possible so they could adapt all of the source material in the shortest amount of time. However, rushing through the source material ended up causing more problems than it solved. Instead of having the story naturally play out over multiple episodes, the studio crammed everything into a single episode, making the pacing extremely fast and hard to follow. This also caused multiple plot holes to appear out of thin air because the writers didn't have enough time to flesh out the story properly. We also got major character development issues, underdeveloped side characters and villains that made no sense. All of this could have been avoided if the studio simply took their time and adapted the manga properly instead of trying to speedrun it in a single season. But even if they had done all of that correctly, it still wouldn't have fixed the biggest problem with this anime, which is the fact that Netflix put it straight into jail. Who greenlit this release strategy is beyond me. To put it bluntly, Netflix releasing Zom 100 straight into jail was an act of God. The only other strategy that would have been worse is if they had released the anime weekly on their platform. That's literally the only thing that would have been worse. Weekly releases on Netflix are a death sentence for any anime. And yet that's exactly what they did to Zom 100. They killed the hype train before it even had a chance to leave the station. Because of this terrible release strategy, Zom 100 never received the hype that it deserved, resulting in poor sales and ultimately leading to the show's cancellation. Now, I know that there is a 2nd season in the works, but I'm not getting my hopes up until I see a trailer. Until then, I'm assuming that the 2nd season is going straight to jail as well. So, Expect the same fate to befall it unless they miraculously change the release strategy. But what do you think? Do you agree with my assessment of Zom 100, or do you think that I'm being too harsh? Either way, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.